Hello, everyone. My name is Shermeen, and today I'll be giving you a quick basic Excel walkthrough. Before we go into it, let me quickly introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Shermeen VELANI, and I'm based in Waterloo, Canada, but I'm originally from Pakistan. I graduated from the University of Waterloo with a background in finance and statistics, and I'm currently working with the Trade Confirmations team at TD Securities here in Canada. So with that said, let's dive into it. So I have my monitor on this side, which is why I will just be looking here, and I have my Excel here. So let me quickly share my screen with you. All right, so here I'm going to assume that you haven't seen Excel before and you don't know what it looks like and what the functions are. So like I said, it will be a very basic Excel tutorial. So Excel is a very important industry skill to have. It's required and very, very useful for basic data exploration, for just gathering some summary statistics, some basic information about what your data looks like, which is very important for data analysis. Whenever you have a data dump, you don't go into it and start analyzing it without cleaning it up and without understanding what the data is like and what it's trying to tell you. So when you have huge data sets like for big corporations, which have millions and millions of rows, that's where Excel would not be helpful. And that's one of the limitations of Excel because it only houses around 1 million rows and around 16,000 columns, which might seem a lot, but it's really not. And when you, again, have huge corporations, you would find that Python, R, and other different softwares are more helpful than Excel. But to get to quickly explore your data and get basic summary statistics, Excel will be your best friend. So with that said, let's start our tutorial. So the first but most important function is, it's not a function, it's a method of filtering. It's a very manual method, but that's how you grab basic information and quickly explore your data. So how you would filter is you would select your sheet by hitting the arrow on the top left side of your sheet. This selects your entire sheet. Then you would go in Home, Filter, and hit Filter. One thing to note over here is that it's very important to either select your sheet or, let me remove the filter, or select the first row, which is called the header. Why this is important before filtering is that when you have huge data sets, you can't really go through every single column and then look for blank rows or blank columns. And whenever you have blank columns, your filter will break. In the sense that it will not filter your entire data set. So let me show you what I mean. If I insert a random blank column in my data set and I try to filter without selecting my sheet or selecting a row, you'll see that only the first 5 columns have been filtered, but the rest have not. So when you try to filter your data, you will get incorrect information because your entire data set has not been filtered. So for that, what you need to make sure is that whenever you're filtering, but if you had selected your entire row, you would see that the filter is there. So if, for example, what is this used for? If I wanted to see how many whole wheat crackers did Boston sell, I would just go in my filter here. Now I'm using a MacBook, which is why my Excel might look different. If you're using Windows, where it's better, Windows is better for Excel. So the layout might be slightly different, but all the functionality is exactly the same. So you don't need to worry about that. I would start typing Boston, and you'll see that now only my rows which have Boston in the city are displayed here on my sheet. And I wanted to see how many crackers did Boston sell. So I would just go crackers, and then it narrows down, it filters down the information to only my required categories, right? So you can see that there were 17 crackers sold in Boston. And if you look at the bottom right of your sheet, you'll see the average, count, and sum. This is a very good way to quickly just get information and then go back to your original data set. But here I can see that there are 17 different crackers sold in Boston. Now, one thing to note is that filters are additive, which means that if you have more than one condition applied, the filter will give you the results for both conditions combined and not a single condition. So if I wanted to go back and look for something else, I would have to remove the filter and then go back into it. So the way you can remove filters is either going in the drop down and clicking remove clear filter. Or what I like to do is if I've applied multiple different filters, I would just go under data and then clear. I'm going to remove this here from my sheet so that it's more visible to you. All right, so this is how you do basic filtering. Even though this is very helpful, it's still super manual and you would still need a way to, you still need an automated way to grab information. How you can do that is by applying functions. What are functions? Functions are methods to grab information, just your summary statistics or whatever you are trying to calculate or trying to explore. So for instance, if I'm interested in the total quantity of items sold throughout different categories and products and cities, I would like to find the sum of the quantities. How you can do that is you start typing in a function by hitting the equal sign. This tells your Excel sheet that you're now typing in a function and you're trying to calculate something. So if I start typing sum, you'll see that Excel narrows down to the sum that it finds. You can either click it or on your keyboard, you can hit tab. The tab key populates the function in your Excel cell. And then you'll notice that Excel gives you a breakdown of the arguments that that function requires. Now, this is very important when you're using more advanced functions like VLOOKUPs, index match, and when you're doing larger calculations, if you're working with different stocks, if you're trying to find out, whatever you're trying to find out, the function gives you the different arguments, and it's very helpful to understand what it requires. So here you can see that it needs different numbers to add up. You can either take different numbers and separate them with commas, and it will give you the sum of the numbers. Or you can also, I hit tab so it populates my sheet. You can also provide it a range, or you can provide multiple ranges. So you can say from here, I want the quantity of the first 5 rows divided by the next rows. So you'll see that it gives you a total value. So that's what the sum function does. Now what we want is that, and this way you can calculate the average, maximum, median, mode, minimum, all that jazz, right? So this is how functions work. One thing that I want to introduce are conditional functions. Conditional functions take in a condition and then apply the argument. So for instance, if I have a bag of fruits and I have apples and oranges and bananas and strawberries, and I only want to count the number of bananas in that bag, I would start picking out different fruits. And if it is a banana, I would count it. If it's not a banana, I would remove it and I would not consider it in my calculation. That's what conditional functions are. So let's go ahead and apply those and see how we can do that. If over here, I've made a little table and I will be just adding my functions here. So if I want the total price of all the products that Boston has sold, my condition is that I only care about the categories sold in Boston, about the products, about the products sold in Boston. I don't care about anything else. So that's one of my conditions. How would I apply that? You would hit equals to tell Excel that you're applying a function right now. And you would use some if and hit tab and it populates. You can use count if, you can use count ifs, which means you add different, you add more than one condition. You can use average, sum, Anything that can apply, that a condition can apply to, you can use that. So I'm going to demonstrate how to use SUMIF. And then if you're interested in other functions, you can try doing that yourselves in your own time. All right, so I just added SUMIF, and now you can see that Excel gives you the arguments that it requires. So the first range is the range in which your category lies, in which your criteria lies, in which your condition lies. Criteria, condition, that is what the first range would, that is what the first argument is. So my criteria or my condition is that I want the city to be Boston, right? I should have labeled the city, so excuse me for that. You can just select the column in which your criteria lies. You'll notice that you don't have to type it in. You can just select whatever your destination is and Excel will populate it. So you would hit comma to divide the different arguments. And what is your criteria? Your criteria is Boston. Because you're typing in a text value, you would have to put it in quotation marks. And for the conditional functions, whenever you're typing in your criteria or your condition, you put it in quotation marks. And that's very important, otherwise your function will break. So my next argument is the sum range. What range do I want to actually add up, right? I'm interested in the total price. And then you close the parentheses, you hit enter, and you'll get the total price of all the products sold in Boston. The total price was $9,896. Let's see if that's actually correct. So a more manual way would be to filter it, right? So if I hit filter, what is my city of interest? It's Boston. So I go down in the drop down and I type Boston. And now if I just select, you can hit Command Shift or Control Shift. So the total sum is 9,896. You can see here at the bottom right of the Excel sheet, it's 9,896. If I remove filter, I can see that's what my answer was. Now you can imagine how much work would it be if you had to apply different conditions and then filter all of them. It just beats the purpose, right, of using Excel. So that's how you can type in, that's how you use conditional functions. Again, like I mentioned before, you can do that for average, you can do that for count, multiple different options, right? Now, another way to use SUMIF is instead of typing Boston, to make it more robust, you can put in the actual cell address. Let me show you what I mean. So if I go equals and then SUMIF, you can just hit tab. What is the first argument? It's the range where your criteria or where your condition lies. So in my case, it lies in column C. You hit comma to separate the arguments. And then this cell L7 is where my condition lies, which is Boston. Hit comma again. Where do I want to sum? Like, what is the column that I actually want to add up? That's in column H. And then I hit close parentheses and then press enter. And you'll see that you get the same value. Why this is more flexible and why this is more important is because you can just drag down the formula to populate the other cells. And the way you can do that is if you hover over the cell, you'll see that at the bottom right, you'll see a plus sign. That plus sign is what you can hold on to and drag down to populate your different cells with the same exact formula. So if I bring it down, I'll see that the same function has been applied, but now using different conditions. Let me rename this to city because it might get very confusing for you guys. Apologies for that. But my first condition is using Boston, right? The second condition is using Los Angeles. The third is using New York. And the fourth is using San Diego. So by dragging it down, I was able to apply my condition, my function to different cells instead of just having to type that in all the time, right? So you can do that for many different functions. Now, one function that I do want to talk about is the weighted average, which is the sum product. If you want an example for, let me give you a real life example about weighted average. The way your grades are calculated, you have different assignments and midterms, final exams, and there's a certain weightage applied to them. 40% final, 20% midterm, 10% assignment one, 10% assignment two. How do you bring it together into one result? You take the weightage and you multiply it by the grade that you got. Then you add the next and the next. That is sum product, and that is called a weighted average. It's a very important function to understand. So let's go ahead and do that. In Excel, it's recognized by sum product. You hit tab to populate it. And one important thing to keep in mind for this function is that it will use two ranges. One range where your weightage lies and the second range where your value lies. Both the ranges, the length of the ranges have to be the same because they're multiplying and then adding, right? So if I choose weightage, comma, and then total price. So what it will do 9,896 multiplied by 20% plus 8,800 multiplied by 20%. That's how weighted average works. And then it would divide it by the total amount. So enter and you get 6,640. Let's see what the average is without the weightage. So you would go equals average, hit tab, and then just select the 4 prices. And you'll see that you get an average of 8,300. So now you can see how weighted average and average is different. All right, so I would highly encourage you that try different functions and try different calculations to do in Excel, and this is how you use them. So this tutorial is meant to give you a basic understanding of what is out there and what is possible to do in Excel. One thing that I would like to cover in this session, which is slightly advanced, and if you just see it the first time, you might get lost, but it's a very, very important thing to understand, is VLOOKUPs and index match. But today we're only going to be covering VLOOKUPs because they do get more advanced. Index match does get more advanced, but I would encourage you to practice VLOOKUPs and the different functions that I just mentioned. And then once you're more comfortable with that, you can get into the more advanced Excel functionalities. So what is a VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP is called vertical lookup, and your data set is a vertical data set. How would you know that? Is that your header, your titles are in the first row, and it's divided by the different columns, right? So your information is vertical and not horizontal. Your titles are in the first row. That is a vertical data set, and you would use VLOOKUPs for that. What is a VLOOKUP? When you have many different sheets, this is called a worksheet. So this is a second sheet, and the whole book is called a workbook. So when you need information from different sheets and you need to combine it together, or you need to reference different sheets, that's when you actually use VLOOKUPs, right? So what I want here is that I want to see what the total price is in Boston of all the different products. Now, if you remember, we did calculate that in the previous sheet, and I just want to grab that information. So imagine if you had many different sheets and you wanted to grab information from different tables. This is where VLOOKUP would come in handy. How VLOOKUP works is that, again, you start typing in the function VLOOKUP, and then you'll see that it populates. So you hit tab to populate it into the cell. First is the lookup value. What is the lookup value? Sorry, I have someone at the door. Sorry about that. So let's continue with our session. All right, so if I start typing VLOOKUP, our lookup value is the value that we're trying to find, the value that we're going to use to extract the other piece of data. So in this case, it is Boston. You hit comma, And then you go back to the raw data sheet where, sorry, I have someone at the, sorry about that. I had someone knocking at my door, so I had to rush to see who it was. All right, let me start. I'm gonna share my screen again. Again, my apologies. All right, so we are back. Let me start this all over again because you might be confused about where we're at. So a VLOOKUP is basically a method to look up different information from different sheets, like I mentioned. How you would use that is you would start typing VLOOKUP. You hit tab to populate it. The first value is our lookup value. This is what we're trying to find. This is our reference point, our reference value. So our reference value is Boston, and we want to see what the total price is for Boston, right? So we look up this value, hit comma. Our second argument is the table array. This is where we have our reference data and our destination data. So the value that we are using to look up our final answer, right? You go in raw data, and we know that this is the table where our reference data lies and our destination data lies. So you would select this table, then you would anchor it. What does that mean? So if I hit function F4, that's how you do it on a MacBook, but I believe in Windows, you can just press F4. What anchoring means is that when you drag down the value, drag down the formula, like I showed you earlier, this table array will not change. We don't want it to change because our data will always lie in that one table that we are looking for, right? The one table that we're looking into. Then you hit comma, and then you need the column index number. What is the column index number? The column index number is the number of the column where our final destination value lies. So in this case, it is 1, 2, 3. The third column is where our destination value lies. So here you would require a number, which is 3, and then you would hit comma, and then it asks you, is it an approximate match or an exact match? We know that it is an exact match because we're looking for exactly Boston. So you would type false, hit close the parentheses and hit enter. And you'll see that you get the same price as you got earlier, which is 9,896. If you are confused, I would highly encourage you to practice this and rewatch the video several times, and then you'll understand how to use VLOOKUPs because it is slightly advanced and it's very easy to be confused in this. So let's do it again. How do we use VLOOKUP? We did equals VLOOKUP. Our first value is our reference value, the value that we are looking to find, and the value that we're going to use to pull our final destination value, which is the first value here, which is Boston. Separate the arguments with comma, and then you take the table array. This is our table array. Our reference value will always, always, always be in the first column, which is our column L here. So VLOOKUP cannot go from right to left. It only goes from left to right. So the value that we are looking up, our reference value, is always going to be in the first column. All right, and then you start counting. So it's column L, 1, 2, and then 3. Our final destination value lies in the third column. So we would put comma 3 and then false for an exact match. So you'll see that it's 9,896. Now notice that over here earlier, I anchored it. I added dollar signs before the row and the column. Why did I do that? Is because when I escaped to remove it, when I drag down the formula, you'll see that this changed. It went from L7 to N11. And if I keep dragging it down, it keeps changing. And this is not what we want because we're only going to look for data in one table array. So when you have huge data sets, you'll get errors. So for us to be able to fixate this, you would hit function F4, or you can also manually add dollar signs between the rows and the columns. And now, enter. And now when I drag down my formula, you'll see that the table array never changes. And you'll notice over here that the values are the same, 8,842 and 8,842. So this is the power of VLOOKUP. And this is a very basic Excel session. I would highly encourage you to practice this. I'm going to stop here. There are many more things that you have to learn, but I think for now, this is enough. And when you get the data set, try different methods, try to find the average price, try to find multiple conditions, try to find similar things for different cities. How many chocolate chip cookies did Los Angeles sell? So as you practice, you might get lost at first, but as you practice, you will get very, very, very good at extracting data, manipulating data, and then you can move forward to different softwares. So with this, I'm going to end the session, and I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you learned something, and good luck.